Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Thanks for watching. Please share, subscribe, all that jazz. I want to cut to the quick because we don't have a lot of time today. I've got Danny Estulin back on the line, and his last show that we did here was an absolute sensation, caused ripples through the ecosystems of politics, I guess you could say. And of course, we just had the election last night, and mass craziness is upon us. I don't know if we're going towards, I'm going to be careful because I know that we're being watched and the AI is watching everything we're doing. So I'm going to be careful here. I don't want to use any charged words because I don't want this to get taken down, because a lot of videos are being taken down right now. It's
A
actually
lot of my videos have been taken down over the last couple of months.
Yeah, they're all happening, and it's happening all at once. So anyway, let's get to it here. It's going to be a rocking episode. So
let's label Donald Trump is going to be flowers, and the other party, the Democrats, they're going to be mushrooms. So flowers against the mushrooms.
I like it. Okay, so it looked like the flowers were winning. I went to bed about midnight. He was ahead by 15 points in Michigan when I went to bed. So I was firmly going, okay, everything's okay. I can go to sleep. See you later. So I go to bed. I wake up, and of course, everything has changed. I was like, what?
They just happened to find hundreds and thousands of votes, all of them miraculously voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah, there was no flowers in the votes, only mushrooms.
There were no flowers, exactly.
Are they poisonous? That's the real question. So it's clearly a fraud. There's no doubt, and it's clearly that these people will do anything. The mushrooms will do anything. At this point, it looks like they'll just do anything, and so where do we stand here? I mean,
well, again, it's both sides will do anything, because the fight right now, Jay, is not for presidency of the United States 2021, 2024. It's rather a fight between human and satanic civilizations, the fight between defining a future world economic model. The way we stand right now, and I explained it before, but for the uninitiated, I'll explain it very briefly again. We had two economic models between 1944, which is the Bretton Woods Economic Conference, okay, and 1991. These economic models were the capitalist Western model and the socialist satellite model, Soviet socialist model, right, and the satellites. And these models coexisted fairly well between the end of the Second World War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. In certain aspects, the West was much better, the commodities of life, comfort, etc. In other aspects, such as free healthcare, in the Soviet Union, for example, since May 1960, citizens didn't pay taxes. We had free healthcare. We had free camps for children. We had free camps for, adults anywhere in the Soviet Union. People had, free universities, and some of the universities back in the Soviet period were infinitely better than some of the, elite private schools you have today, which means, people are saying that, the salaries were lower. They were much lower, yes, but when you add all these other things, you basically end up in a situation where it's a very, very stable country. And you had a lot of these extras, such as free schooling, free healthcare, free everything else, no taxes, and in some, and again, so in that aspect, the Soviet system was better. In other aspects, such as demographics, which is a third element, they were more or less even. The Soviet Union had 340 million, the United States 220. But again, all things given, they were more or less equal. Then in 1991, these two models merged into one global model. Okay, and the whys, the who's, goes beyond the scope of this interview. But let's say that it had nothing to do with that the Soviet system was worse than the Western capitalist system, because again, we're seeing what's happening right now in the West. 30 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, basically coming to the same point, historical point. But the reason these two systems merged is because the Soviet nomenclature, which are the leaders of the country, they didn't want to sit, if you're sitting in a proverbial restaurant, you have two tables. You have the capitalist table and the socialist table. They wanted to sit at this one big capitalist table and be part of the global financial wheelers dealers. And so they destroyed the country from within, because you couldn't destroy, global thermonuclear power from without. And so they destroyed it from within. And so these two systems, they merged into this one global liberal banking, financier, globalist parasitical system. And that system survived until about 2005, 2006, because what had happened and this is important what I'm explaining right now, to understand why this election is such a pivotal election in the history of not only of the 21st century, of over the last 200 years, or even more so. So the point is that the capitalist West in the 1980s found itself, because they controlled 60% of global economy, and the Soviet Union satellite controlled 40%. And so they found themselves in the 1980s that they were reaching the limits to growth of their area of influence. So for them to survive, they needed to survive at somebody else's expense, because a model economy can work or as an open system, which means you steal from somebody else. Okay, that's how the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the American, republic, bringing the democracy to four corners of the universe, with a loaded gun and color revolutions. Okay, but because you have nothing else to steal, or you didn't have more to steal, you need to take over the Soviet space in order to survive. And so when they did that, when they merged the two systems, they suddenly had a new lease on life for the 40% of the global space. And so between 1991 and 2006, they were able to do that, expand at somebody else's expense. Because again, if you look at the statistics of poverty in 1989, the Soviet and satellite space, Poland, East Germany, et cetera, all these countries, we had a poverty rate, or people living, below the poverty rate, 14 million people. That's in 1989. In 1996, that's 7 years later, that those living, below the poverty level in the Soviet and satellite space went up from 14 million to 168 million people. Okay, but the thing is that the planet Earth is a globe. It's a round circle, which means that there comes a point where you reach the limits of that growth. And what the West did by expanding between 1991 and 2006, they reached that limit of space again. And in 2008, what they called the subprime crisis, the Lehman Brothers collapse, you call it whatever you want, but it was the beginning of this end that we're seeing right now. Because the problem, it has nothing to do with Putin, it has nothing to do with China, it has nothing to do with coronavirus. It has to do with a very simple fact. We as humanity have reached the limits to growth. And I know a lot of people will say that's not true. You have Africa, you have most of China, which is, very poor. You have most of India. That's very true. That's 4 billion people. But the problem with that is these people in Africa, every one of them, except for, 6 dictators, they're all surviving on $1 a day, which means that if you want to sell them a telephone, which is what, $800, $900, $1,000, they can't buy it, because they don't have the money. They make $1 a day. And the same could be said for about 1 billion people in India. The same could be said for 1 billion people in China, who, by the way, still use today agricultural tools from the 19th century. Why is that? When China is such a progressive country, and it is. Because if they gave them, the Chinese government gave them 21st century tools, 700 million of these people would be unemployed. This way they have a stick and they make a hole. And so 1 billion people are doing something. And so the problem for the West is, if we're to build up these cultures, Africa, entire continent, 1.5 billion people, India, another 1 billion people who've been doing the same thing for thousands of years. I sit on the side of the road and I have no qualms whatsoever, even crossing the street and doing the same thing, which is nothing, sitting on the other side of the road, picking my nose. Okay, and the same thing could be said for China. So the point is that for them to actually build these people into consumers, you need to create infrastructure, you need to build out, you need schools, you need education, you need factories, you need to make sure, and this is 2 or 3 generations, which means that somebody has to invest a lot of money to build the infrastructure, to put the rail tracks, so you have the magnetic levitation trains, so you have the schools that people can go to, kids go to schools, and they become teenagers, then they become adults, they go to universities there, not in Europe or the United States. They go there, so they grow whole, it's homegrown. But that takes, again, 50, 60 years, that's 3 generations. And they don't have the time because we've reached the limits to growth. So, or you build out, or you destroy. There's no other way. And they've destroyed. So they say, we can't build out, we don't have the time. So, which is why you're seeing today globally, the global dismantling of the global, not only of the world economy, but the entire concept of what, society, civilization is all about. And the elections, coming back to your original question, the elections in the United States is not the fight who's going to control the White House, but who's going to control the dialectic of what the future world is going to look like. Because again, and people are going to say, you're pro-Trump because you wrote a book about him, you're speaking, volumes, how he's a good president. I cannot be pro against Trump because I'm not American. I'm not Canadian. I couldn't care less about Donald Trump. Okay. I look at him as a paleontologist looks at a dinosaur. Okay. I examine him, taste him, look at him, analyze him. And then I come out and do a report and say, this is what this is. And the same thing with Trump. But I understand, because I'm a doctor of conceptual intelligence. So I understand that what we're seeing today in the United States, if Joe Biden wins, an old, demented Joe Biden, okay, who speaks gibberish, doesn't know where he is, confuses his sister and his wife, and but anyway, and I feel bad for him because he's old and he should be doing something else. Yes. He should not be made to run for president. They made him run. The poor guy. I'm sure he didn't want to run. He doesn't even know where he is. I gave a speech yesterday, and he said, "America, good night." And this is a direct quote. I'm not making it up. Anyway, what I'm trying to say, maybe that's what I sound like too when I talk. I don't know. When I'm his age, maybe I'll do the same thing. But the point is, okay, if this man wins the election, again, Biden is a face, just like Trump is a face. But if Biden wins the elections, then what's going to happen is the people who are behind it, because Biden he doesn't represent a Democratic Party, just like Trump doesn't represent a Republican Party. He represents a concept, which is an evil concept of man, because the people behind them represent that. It's a concept, a model based on infinite expansion at everybody else's expense, but because you cannot expand anymore on the planet Earth because they've stolen everything from everybody and everyone is now poor. You can't steal something from someone who has nothing. Okay, you can skim them, but you can't steal anything from them. Right. So the point is, they need to create an alternative economic model, and they can't do that because concept liberalism today is an anathema to anything which is different than what I've been doing since 1944. And the problem that they have, the only option that they have left, is to print not trillions, but quadrillions of dollars. And you can't print your way out of this because we've reached the limit. There's a $4 quadrillion bubble in the world. If people are wondering what this number is, it's number 4 and 15 zeros. Yep. And you cannot print this thing away. You cannot make it. The only way, Jay, you can make this thing disappear is if you have a thermonuclear war. Because if not some little piddly war in the Middle East, okay, but a thermonuclear war, because a big war on a global scale, okay, wipes out debt or writes off debts and responsibilities. Oh, why do you think people like, what's his name, Bill Gates, and why do you think they're building $100 million bunkers? Because they like to be living like rats underground? I'm going to spend $100 million on a bunker. No, I don't want to live on a beautiful island with a drinking pool in hand looking at, at the sunset. I want to live underground because they understand. And so they tried that tack when they killed Soleimani, January 3rd, 2020. That didn't work out very well because the world said, we don't want a thermonuclear war. And so this global deep state elite, they had plan B, and plan B is coronavirus. But the point is, the idea is you need to dismantle this order because, we'll talk about this in a minute, because what we're coming to right now is the end of a technological paradigm. which means that we've come to the limits of growth within a technological development, which means we have to get to a higher order of magnitude as far as the technology is concerned, if we want to keep advancing. And Donald Trump represents a different model. Not that he has a model, because again, he's a face. Whereas Biden is the face of global liberalist, banking, financier, parasitical global world order. You know, with the Soroses and Clinton and Obamas and the deep state and, you know, mainstream media and Silicon Valley and Hollywood and intelligence agencies, you know, bureaucracy, et cetera, and Wall Street. Trump is another face of a different project. His project is called Black International. He's not even an American president. Because again, remember, maybe for us, you know, where we come from, I don't know, maybe grandfather or great-grandfather at best. But people who have bloodlines going back 1,000 years, they know who they are. They know where they come from. They know what their bloodline is. They know where their, you know, ancestors, who they are, what they did, where they stood, who they, you know, fought for. So to think that Trump, who's half Scot and half German, doesn't remember his roots is absolutely silly, which means that Trump is a different project. He represents what I call Black International. Why is it Black International? It's called blood and soil. Okay, these are the old European landed aristocracy. Right. People who go back 1,000 years in time. I know if you read what's that paper called? The Globe and Mail. It's a great paper, you know, if you want to wrap fish, okay? It's not very good for reading because it's crap, okay? But for wrapping fish, Canadian newspapers are the best, okay? I've tried using American newspapers, not the same thing, okay? But what I'm trying to say is that Trump understands, so Trump represents the people who are nationalists, industrialists, isolationists. And for them, the idea, make America great again, translation. Let's rid ourselves of the yoke of the global liberal banking financier power. And so what we have today is this fight between two very, very, very different ideals of the future, philosophies, okay? And obviously, if Trump wins, the first thing that he's going to do when 2021 comes around, he's going to sit down with the other two global powers, which is Russia and China, and also India, because India, you can't, you know, not count them in because that's 1.5 or 2 billion people. Nobody knows how many they are there, okay? So these four great global powers, they're going to sit down and they're going to work out, let's call it Yalta 2, let's call it Bretton Woods 2, let's call it whatever you want to call 2. Right. Rules of engagement of a new global post-crisis project. It's going to take some time because first thing you need to do is you need to work it out. What are the rules of engagement? Because again, if you remember Yalta 1, when the World War II ended, you had the three winners of World War II, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. They sat down in Yalta and they worked out the rules of engagement between winners, countries, and losers of the post-World War II world. Today, the situation is different because the winners are they countries or are they projects? Because we're fighting against not a country. We're not fighting against the United States or fighting against England. We're fighting against a liberal banking financier, a global order which has taken over every nook and corner of the galaxy. And this is we have to get rid of before we hope to create something different. Because if they win, we are killed. They will destroy us. They simply don't need 8 billion people.
That's right. And Biden represents that group?
Biden represents that group. Again, Biden he's a poor, demented old man with dementia. But he represents behind him. And some people will say it's Hillary Clinton. It's not Hillary Clinton. These people, the Hillary Clintons, the Soroses, they're nobodies. The people talk about these people because that's all they see.
That's right.
And the reason that's all they see is because when you start really investigating deeper and beyond that, again, I come from Russian military counterintelligence. You know, we have, in the Soviet Union, we had, in Russia, obviously, today too, okay? We had libraries which are obviously accessible to regular people, which are stocked to the brim with, you know, esoteric, you know, literature. books which, just blow your mind on the kinds of things that, Gaia does, only, to a factor of 100.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so this is the kind of stuff where you get to this level, the heraldry, the Vatican, the people behind them, the old families, the blood families, you realize how powerful and important these elements, infinitely more so than anything they tell us. They talk about the Rothschilds, as the world's, who told you they're the world's richest family?
Well, they did.
You got it from where? Well, the reason you got that, there's so many other families out there. And if you go back to the old Jewish families who escaped Spain, who escaped Portugal, going back to the 1492, or even before that, we can go to the 7th, 8th century. The Baruch, for example, there's a bank called Standard Chartered Bank. Those who feel like European soccer, your last team to win English Premier League is called Liverpool Football Club, right, which is a very famous football team. On their uniforms, their sponsor is Standard Chartered Bank. This bank belongs to the Baruch family, and these people are from the 5th century. So they've been around for 1,500 years. Nobody talks about them. Everybody talks about the Rothschilds, who've been around for 300 years. Why? Because you protect the real power, okay? Because the real power is invisible.
That's
if
right.
it's in Google, they don't exist. The more, like Kanye West has 100 million pages, he is a nobody. Kim Kardashian, she is more of a nobody. People who are powerful, they don't exist. They're absolutely invisible. So the fight today is between two very different models for the future. And for our sake, meaning for the planet's sake, we better hope that Donald Trump wins. Not because he's a better candidate or a better president, but because he represents a model that gives us, humanity, a chance to have a future, something that Biden doesn't. Because if Biden becomes president, mark my words, in the next 12 to 15 months, U.S. economy will tank about 50, 60%. It will tank with Trump also, but a lot less. And also Trump gives us an option to sit down and work out a different model. Biden doesn't, because Biden is a natural enemy of all these people.
And he'll never stand up to the neocons. You know that. They'll
Again,
just run right over him.
The thing is, again, Biden is a face. There's a ventriloquist, who moves his hands, does the talking for him. But it doesn't even matter about Hunter Biden. It makes all this stuff. It doesn't matter. Right. If you go up several levels, because again, you can look at things like this when you're sitting in your bedroom looking out the window, you see people walking outside your house. And maybe to you, if you live in a little village of 5 houses, this is the entire world because you've never seen anything else. There's never been, the last time somebody walked by your house was like 20 years ago. So to you, this is the world. But if you start going up and up higher levels of knowledge, if you go to the satellite and you actually see from the vantage point of a satellite what's happening on the planet Earth, then you have a different picture of what the world looks like. Right. And for that world, we have to work out what this post-globalism world will look like, because again, globalism, as we know it, is coming to an end. It's a matter of, it's a matter of time before it's completely destroyed, because there were nowhere else to expand. And one of the things we're seeing with this new advent of new technological revolution of the 6th techno paradigm, and if you want, we can talk about this, I think it's important, is the fact that globalism no longer matters. The next stage in our development is regionalization of global economies. And in this sense, what we're seeing, for example, with BRICS, first of all, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That was first attempt at regionalizing the world economy. And the second was Brexit. Okay. Right. But the point is, after the globalization, after the concept of nation states, we can say, let's call it global 1.0. That started, 1648 with Westphalia. And that ended with at the end of 1960s of the 20th century when they created Global 2.0, One World Company Limited. In other words, corporations that have more power than the governments on the planet. Then went to in the world post-industrial, which is white collar, okay, where the bankers, the financiers, the money people, the money managers, the speculators, these people became the in crowd. Okay, because you had the industrial and then you had the 4th techno paradigm, These are the factories, people, the engineers, the architects. And then suddenly in the 1980s with Reagan, they became passé. It was no longer cool to be an architect. It's like being a loser. You need to be a white collar guy working in a bank, moving pieces of paper, playing with numbers on a computer screen. Okay? And so this post-industrial, that's why it's called post-industrial. Basically, think of it as a human zoo, okay? Where factories were turned into Disneyland, global Disneyland. Okay, that's post-industrial economy, easy, post-industrial. And that lasted between 1980 and today. And today it's crumbling all around us. And you can't stop it. It's like you cannot undo a ding-dong of a doorbell. Oops, it's done. That's it. You can't undo it. You can't undo this collapse because we've reached the limits to growth. There's nowhere to go. And so they need to come up with something else. But for them to come up with something else, they need to invent another model. And at this moment in time, they don't have another model to invent.
I've heard that they've decided to the people running the show to pull back into the United States and Canada to make this the area where they're going to put their power over the next few years, and they're pulling back from China. And I don't know, is that true?
Let me frame it differently. Any kind of a short-term plan that whoever these people are, whether the Biden people, the Trump people, or whoever people, they're literally coming, butting heads with the end of technological growth of a certain level. Let me explain this to you, because again, to understand where we're going, we need to understand why we're going there and why there is no other solution. There's no way. There's like you have a bifurcation point, I have a separation, a fork in the road.
Yep.
So you can go this way or that way. Well, this way leads to certain death because it's a dead end. There's nowhere to go. When you go to that road, it's a dead end because you've reached the limits. So you got to take something else. So for example, we went from the fourth industrial economy to the fifth, which is again, post-industrial, financial technology, IT, entertainment, telecommunications. And now we're coming into the sixth, which is trans-industrial, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with transsexuals. Trans-industrial is robotics, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, additive technologies like 3D printing, for example. Then you have the seventh techno paradigm. Transhumanism, nano, bioinfocogno, fusion, helium-3, base on the moon, all that kind of stuff. So what's the difference, for example, between post-industrial and trans-industrial? What is the main difference between these two types of post-industrialism is what comes after industrialization, as I told you before. So these are the economies of consumption, the economy of services, the economy of experience. It's a credit economy with a developed banking sector. As I said, call it a zoo of capital. Whether we're talking about knowledge, reputation, etc. It's the transformation of industrial space in cities into recreational areas. So you have industries, now you have human zoos, you have your Disneyland, your Canada Wonderlands, et cetera, et cetera. It's about ecology, it's about nature protection, it's about energy-saving technologies. And trans-industrialism is what comes after post-industrialism, which is on its deathbed right now. It is a manufacturing economy based on robotics, for example. Right. This is the crisis of banks and financial technologies. And in part, it's the crisis of the service economy, which is dying. Which is why, to me, 2 years ago, 18 September 2018, I wrote a tweet, and somebody tweeted, sent it to me about a year ago, when I said, in 2 years, tourism is going to be dead. And people were laughing. They were saying, this guy is nuts. Tourism is dead and it's not coming back. Why? Because it's the service economy of the fifth techno paradigm, which is now at its deathbed. It's also the emergence of planetary forms of capital and the transition from the conservation of nature to the rational management of nature. So again, if you kind of look, and this again, it's a kind of different interview because we don't talk about just Trump and elections and Biden, but it helps to put everything in perspective because people have to understand why this election is so important. Because again, for example, if you're looking at the techno paradigms, the pre-techno was agriculture, animals, agrarian economy. Then the first techno paradigm was like about 300 years ago, textile industry, which started in about 1772. And so what happens is with each technological paradigm, it becomes more effective and more vital for progress and also human development as a species. Then we have the second techno paradigm, steams, trains, about 1825. Third, heavy machinery factories. Fourth, industrial economy. Fifth, the post-industrial economy. So the whole concept of techno paradigm, it's not a point when a new technology is invented. What we're talking about is a dominant technology at a particular point of time. What we're talking about, technological advancement, society, politics, economics, whatever. A change in paradigm also is social change with society, because the more advanced technological development, the less there's need for humans. And this is such an important point right now, okay? Because again, politics will always be behind technological development. Because technology is exponential, politics, economy, they're linear. So you can't solve political problems without solving economic problems. And you certainly can't solve economic problems without solving social problems. And we're seeing it in America today. Because progress is impossible without modernization. And modernization can't exist without a vision in the future. That's the problem with people like, what's his name, Biden. Because they have no vision of the future. And what's more, the moral breakdown of a nation happens not from material losses, but from the lack of vision of the better future. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. And again, so what does this mean for us? It means that, you know, right today, for example, we have conflict between governments, we have conflict between governments and corporations, corporations against corporations, dominant culture against other culture. You have legislative branch against executive, against judiciary branch. You have the elite versus the people. You have the locals against the migrants. You have the humans against transhumans. You have culture one against culture two, as we're seeing right now in France, or we're seeing in Europe in general. So any of these conflicts, any one of them can lead to war. But what happens when you have all of them at the same time? Because not even a global war can solve them. So what does it come down to? It comes down to that nobody has a conceptual vision of the world post-crisis. The Chinese do, yes, they do for China. We don't want to be like the Chinese. So that their model doesn't apply to us. The Jews have their own model, okay? It's the Solomon plan. They've been pushing it for 3,000 years, but it's not applicable to the rest of the world. It's only applicable to, you know, to that group of people. So again, what we're seeing right now technologically, distance learning, robotics, artificial intelligence, economic structures not dependent on human labor, and that's very important. Virtual world, which is a world of compatibility. So there's no need for physical movement from space one to space two. In fact, closing of borders is an example, a perfect example of virtual world at work. Cryptos controlled by governments, barter system, intelligent contracts, technologies related to color, for example, photonics, biophotonics, sociophotonics, et cetera, et cetera. And the key element in all of this, and this again goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about, you know, fundamental difference between these two individuals. In the sixth techno paradigm, the key role for artificial intelligence in all aspects. So it's not about drones, it's not about robots. It's a new philosophy of creating an ambience that doesn't depend on people, which means that translating to human language, humans are becoming obsolete, and we better find something for us to do, and we better define what it is that we do better than robots. There's an article that came out, I think about a week ago. I posted it on my Twitter feed. And South China Morning Post, which is like the Financial Times of Hong Kong. And they said over the next 3 years, 85 million jobs in China will be replaced by robots. And in Europe, that number is 167 million. So if you add these two up, you're talking about 250 million people between Europe, which is Judeo-Christian civilization, capitalist world, and China, who will be left without a job. And these jobs are not coming back ever. So the problem for us globally, because the United Nations also talked about this, they say in the world there's 3.3 billion people working. 1.6, half, 50% of these jobs are in danger of disappearing. And so if we pick Joe Biden as president of the United States, we are voting for the elimination of humanity, which is exactly what the elite want. Again, there's a reason why, if you kind of think about it from a little bit higher vantage point. They want Joe Biden to win because with Biden, they have the perfect excuse to dismantle humanity, to eliminate grand parts of the population. They simply don't need us. It's difficult to manage 8 billion people. It's much easier to manage 1 billion. So if you can have a thermonuclear war and kill 5 billion people, great. If you can't, you can have pandemic. If you don't have that, let's think of something else. If you don't have that, let's get, a demented old man who doesn't know who his wife is, confuses her with a sister. Okay, or maybe, I don't know, maybe he does it on purpose, I don't know. Okay, so, and he just, it's jokers on us. But the point is, collapse means 90% of humanity will be left jobless. And not only on the human level, but also on the level of laws. There's a thing, what they call laws kamurat. In plain English, it's an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Well, these things have been around since 1762 before Christ. So that's almost 4,000 years. And these laws will have to be written because, for example, now you have a car. Okay, you drive into a parking lot. Okay, there's a machine that reads your license plate. So without you realizing it, there's a contract being signed between the artificial intelligence, your vehicle, and the machine. Okay, and so you park inside, and there's a contract. That contract exists. It's an instant virtual space, but it exists. And so for the first time in the history of humanity, the objects are becoming subjects. And so, with the rise of artificial intelligence, with the rise of sixth techno paradigm, our world will change completely. So there's a reason why, for example, they lead the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, all these groups. Why are they talking about 2024 as the point when COVID disappears and all these other things happen? Because 2024 is the point in our history where this fork in the road, where we decide which road to take. And if we decide to go towards the sixth techno paradigm, it starts in 2024, because right now it's just a preamble. And that's when the global reset, the new economic model, the new financial thing, the cashless society, electronic concentration camp with tiers, big data, 5G, all that stuff, that's when it's going to come together. Okay, 2024. So there's a reason for that. But again, you can't understand it if people are only looking at Joe Biden is a good guy because Trump is a racist. He pees on a bed in a Moscow hotel room. He sleeps with, so I don't care who he sleeps with. I don't want to sleep with Trump. You know what I mean? If he pees on your bed, don't invite him to your house. Do you know what I mean?
I'm with you. I don't care either. And I've been saying for a while now that the bifurcation is that, do we go down the road to full-blown transhumanism, or do we go down the road, which weirdly enough is happening, where we go more rural and we bring our high-tech toys with us, and that would also give us something to do, growing your own food and taking care of the animals and all the rest of the things that happens in a semi-rural environment. So I think that's actually the choice, and I think you kind of said it in a much better way than I've been saying it.
There's another area, because it's like, I'm watching all the stuff that's happening right now, because again, I can't help it. Just it's the nature of the beast. It's what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. I analyze things, so I look at it from a different vantage point. So I see all the stuff, the insanity around the elections and around COVID and around global collapse and the general hysteria, because that's what it is. You see these people going absolutely nuts on the streets of just any number of cities, whether it's Washington, D.C., whether it's Portland, Oregon, where they legalized all kinds of hard drugs yesterday. I know that's gonna end well. Crack cocaine, all that kind of stuff. That's gonna end really well. Okay, Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles, people are going insane. They call it the flakes, but it's not the flakes. It's society in general. So I started kind of thinking about how does it relate to what we're talking about, and it relates. It fits like a glove. They're using COVID as a kind of a psychosomatic, massive, weapon of destruction. Yeah. But it goes beyond that. So let me just explain to you what I mean. Over the last, it's especially visible, since Trump became president in 2016. So the topic of information wars has become, let's say, the most popular, not only among specialists, but also the general public. So again, as a general rule, there are two types of generation of information wars. There's information war 1.0, which is good old, agitation and propaganda using internet tools, to erode or change someone's belief. We know how that works. That's easy. Gene Sharp and all that other kind of stuff. But then there's information war 2.0, which is the creation of a combination of, let's call it behavior psychology, personal data, and also interfaces. So this information war 2.0, it's not about beliefs, it's not about ideals, it's not about thoughts, but it's about instincts. It's about habits. It's also about stereotypes. So as for information warfare, for example, COVID-19 can be called information war 3.0, and that's fought with viral weapons. Now, a viral or biological weapon, it's a weapon of mass destruction as terrible as an atomic or chemical one, if it's a real viral biological weapon. Also for scientists, okay, a human being is divided into psyche and somatic, material and ideal, physical and mental. But man is an individual, not a dividual. So consequently, a technologically accurate hit on a body, okay, can lead to a non-healing mental wounds. And again, we've talked about this kind of stuff before. We know how that works. And this informational hit, if done right, can lead to physical illness and even terminal epidemic, which can kill a person. Right. Now, this isn't now. In the 1930s, there was a famous Canadian endocrinologist. His name was, I think, Hans Seiley, if I'm not mistaken. He proposed this, what he called the stress hypothesis, corroborated by numerous field studies. Now, stress is a combination of physiological and also psychological reactions of a body to a certain stimulus. Let's call it the stress factor. And the main causes of stress, they're a very serious threat to life and also to health. Prolonged conflict situations, loss of income, serious illness, death of loved ones. And that's something that with COVID today, nobody's talking about the number of people who have killed themselves, killed others as a result of stress, because the number are, just leave you flabbergasted. Now,
I already know it because I have friends who have departed, not from COVID, but from depression and drug abuse. And
exactly. Just to give you an example, in the Soviet Union, once the Soviet Union collapsed on Christmas Day, 1991, between 1991 and 1994, in 3 years, 25 million of my former countrymen killed themselves, died of drugs, stress-related, alcohol, et cetera, depression. So
I really appreciate what you're saying here. I really do, because nobody is saying this. This is the secret Holocaust in a way.
Well, it is, because again, if you kind of, according to scientists, the science of stress, the deepest stress and the impact of information factors or somatic ones occurs under conditions of ever-growing uncertainty, because that's what we have right now in combination with threats to life, especially in the context of catastrophic events. And, let's pick one that we have today. Okay, so it's easy to see that the triad perfectly describes the current situation that we're seeing with coronavirus, we're seeing with politics, we're seeing the economy, we're seeing with global conflict and possible thermonuclear war, civil war in the United States, concentration camps that are allegedly building in Canada, concentration camps that they're building in Australia, etc. So the average citizen is in a state of uncertainty, cleverly maintained and manipulated by the media, convinced in the context of speeches of various authority figures, Fauci and others, that the coronavirus, but again, it's not only coronavirus, is a moral danger for him. And all this in the face of growing lack of money, and also these $4 quadrillion bubble that I mentioned earlier, leave people in a state, of depression. Now, according to statistics, and this is interesting, okay, this isn't just in Canada, but all over the world, in any condition, even the most difficult conditions, between 12 and 20% of people retain self-control and the ability to act clearly and decisively according to the situation. Now, this isn't special forces, this isn't SEALs, okay? This is just between 12 and 20% of people globally can do that. And in about 60 to 75% of cases, prolonged stress causes not only panic attack, phobias, and paralysis of the will, but leads to somatic diseases of various severities. Yeah. So in the framework of psychosomatic operations planned and carried out, because this is what we're seeing right now. People die in a traditional and conventional war with the use of firearms, but this death takes place within the framework of medical statistics, such as death from certain diseases and not death on the battlefield. So they may be invisible, but they exist, and they are far superior and greater than anything people can imagine, which is why sometimes, like for example, you saw what happened a couple of days ago in a terrible tragedy in Vienna, when the terrorists were killing people, and some people were there to see it. They were recording with their telephones from their homes as these people were killed. And so they're screaming at the top of that of desperation because they don't know how to deal with this kind of stress. And so understanding the nature of stress and its consequences allows us to conclude that the information war 3.0 or psychosomatic operations, call it whatever you want, are specifically aimed at unleashing powerful stresses that affect millions of people, because that's one of the ways to kill them. Because even a preliminary analysis of the psychosomatic operations, they reveal various technologies used against the population globally, but it's the same technology that they're using in Canada, in the United States, in Spain, in Colombia, in Australia. There's a reason why you have 7 policemen beating the living daylights out of a poor guy who was walking down the street with his 7-year-old son without a mask. They beat him to a pulp in front of his kids. Somebody was recording it to make sure that we all saw it. Now, there's something else. Okay? These are information cascades. Now, information cascades occur when individuals making decisions or choosing a role model copy the behavior of other participants who have already made a decision without taking their own information into account. So the more participants have made the same choice or adopted the same, let's say, behavioral stereotype, the more willingly undecided individuals will follow. In fact, information cascade technology is a very, very special tool to generate gregarious behavior, if there's such a thing. Now, another technology, which is, again, we've studied this in the Soviet Union, Russia, in counterintelligence. It's called Glyph Anchoring. Now, a glyph is a photo or visual image that is literally imprinted on memory and becomes, let's say, an attitude and dominance that determines individual and collective behavior. We see that a lot in films. Certain images we remember long after we saw the film because it affected our psyche. So the glyph, in contrast to the meme, has profound characteristics, even relying on the archaic layers of the psyche. Because again, in counterintelligence, we have to study human psychology to understand how people think. So in practice, basically, the glyph becomes the kind of semantic core around which stereotypes of behavior, dominance, attitude are formed. And so when you talk about Canadians, all goofy Canadians, holy woolly, the elk there, standing next to your house, it's a kind of glyphs, okay, that dominate our psyche. So by themselves, glyphs can be both real and can also be fake. For example, the European refugee crisis, that started back in 2012, was triggered in large part by a photograph. We all remember that photograph of a body of a 3-year-old refugee boy washed up on the Turkish coast. Remember that, no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is an example, okay, of how a glyph works in our psyche. How you can use that glyph, to move a certain dialectic in a particular direction. So there's a reason to believe that a modification of the recently developed what they call stimulated amplification of social actions method, it's a methodology, was used as part of the COVID-19 psychosomatic operations, because the essence of the method is as follows: artfully craft content, then release it into online social communities with at least average cohesion. It must be recognized by members of the community without fail. Okay, then with the help of agents of change. Now, what are these agents of change that we're talking about? Well, for example, we can talk about leaders of opinion, which are influencers. Okay, what they do is you take an influencer within the resonance chamber effect, which is an official, entering the arena, formulating the actions that community members should take according to the findings, of this group of people based on a consensus previously reached within a group as a result of actions of informal gurus. So in a framework of this global psychosomatic special operations, the technology of info chaos, which is what we have right now, is actively used. Its essence is very simple, but its application is very, very effective, because any information that is true but unfavorable or undesirable for the organizers of special operation, especially information of a factual nature and supported by, among other things, scientific reports, is instantly detected using advanced search engines and is intentionally made loud. And this is what we're seeing right now with COVID. In Canada, the United States, and other countries in Spain, they're taking the governments to court saying, show me proof that masks and everything else actually save lives. Now, as the last point, okay, at the same time, if we're talking about fakes. Now, fakes, and this is important for the people to understand, because again, we are vaccinating them against all the stuff being used against us, because we have to recognize it. Fakes are not necessarily used to create noise. You can have conflicting judgments on the subject of noise, work mark better. It's called a dialectic, because in a specific situation with, for example, with coronavirus, the speeches of renowned and venerable, quote unquote, epidemiologists are extremely rare. So you have the screens of televisions, computers, smartphones, they're filled with these doctors, various specialties, but not virologists, politicians, civil servants, aspiring analysts, etc., etc. So as a result, the population is in a situation of global lack of reliable information. And if you ask a question, well, why do I need to wear a mask? When 85% of people who wore masks got coronavirus, you immediately get labeled a COVID idiot. Because again, before it was a conspiracy theory. Do you know what I mean? Before any time you question the official rhetoric, you're a conspiracy theorist. And what Donald Trump was able to do, one of his biggest things that he was able to achieve in the last 4 years, is he showed the entire world that this conspiracy is real, that the deep state actually exists, okay? And they're our greatest enemy. And that's why this, hatred, visceral hatred, okay, towards Donald Trump and anything that he represents. So again, just to finish it up, living in this situation is in itself is a powerful stressor and makes an additional contribution to the psychotization of the population, which is what we're living through right now. If you kind of go back, okay, and think about what I said, all the elements of what we're seeing right now globally is there, okay? And it's this society at war with itself, not knowing where to look, what to do, what's the moral equivalent of things I can believe in, okay? For me actually to follow this person and say, I trust his opinion. And this creates, this mental havoc in the entire population. We get these, influencers and there's glyphs and everything else working for you. And you create a situation where you have so many fake news mixed in with official reality and also parallel reality, unless you understand who is running the game and how this gamut is being played, you have absolutely no way of knowing what's true and what's not.
Yeah, it's like like they're choosing a soft kill method of getting rid of the population. We all thought it would be, some disease that would race through the population, kill everybody, or starvation, but it's a combination of things. It's letting really hard drugs loose into society and then making them legal, like they're doing in Portland. It's called
harvesting. It's called harvesting because again, they do this globally. So you sell guns and butter, to warring sides. You kill the people, you harvest them, you get the money because you sell both of them guns so you can kill each other. You can step in with the United Nations, forces controlled by the by Central Intelligence Agency, by MI6, and then you can control the land, you control the owners of territories and the presidents and the dictators, and that's how it works. This is the same thing. Gentlemen, you harvest the people. And somebody was saying to me the other day, why is Trudeau letting all these people from the third world, like 400,000 or 500,000 a year, almost 1.5 million people over the next 3 years? I said, because he's trying to dilute the population of white conservatives. 2 + 2 is 4. Do you know what I mean? And so these people are going to come into the country. They're going, I don't even need to explain it because people, are smart enough to understand the rest of it. The dynamic is very simple. But what you're going to have in Canada is what you have today in Europe, okay? Because these people are never going to assimilate into the country because they come from a different world. Do you know what I mean? And you're asking them to assimilate into a culture that has nothing to do with their values.
Yep.
Their values are different. It's not that they're better or they're worse. They're different. They're a different animal. Okay, and a different animal has to live amongst its own. And they have 50 countries to choose from, but they come to Canada for obvious reasons, free healthcare and everything else. But they've done the same in France. They tried that tack. And today you have 8 million people, you have 5.6 million Muslims, okay, Arabs from the third world, which is 8.5% of the population. And these people have absolutely no interest in, in becoming one of them. They have French passport, they speak French, but they're their own community. And so you have, and you have what you have. There's a reason why Marseille is a no-go zone for the police. They don't even use euros in Marseille. They use golden dinars, just to give you an idea how that works. Mm-hmm. And this is what someone like Trudeau is trying to create in Canada. Trudeau is the most dangerous politician in the history of Canada. If we want Canada to still be Canada a generation from now, okay, we got to get rid of this guy. Not that the other guy is going to be better. They're all globalists, okay? But the veracity of this guy has no limits. And people, again, are too dumb. You can see it, say, why are they doing it to themselves?
Yeah.
Because, again, it's like, again, this isn't a thing about, Canada, we're sophisticated, we're democracy, we're, all this stuff about human rights and freedom of speech. It never existed. They lied to you. And now that they no longer need it, the mask comes off and they show you globally for what they are.
Exactly what.
Okay, extreme dictatorship. Law and order doesn't exist. Concentration camp without tears.
So before we go, I want to ask you about that rumors about that Trudeau letter. A person from the Liberal Party and wrote a letter saying that they'd had a meeting with the PM and they were told all this stuff. I'm sure you know about that. Do you think that's real?
Well, I don't know in Canada, but there's no reason to think why it's not. Because again, I posted on my Twitter account yesterday, those interested, it's at Estulin Daniel, a video from Hungary, okay, which was posted on one of the Telegram channels, political channels in Russia, where they do about a 3-minute run by car showing this entire concentration camp structures, and people saying, I know this is World War II. No, this is not World War II. This is Hungary. They're building the same thing in Australia. They're building the same thing in New Zealand. They so much said so. They're talking about the same thing in the Netherlands. They're talking about the same thing in England. There's no reason to think why they're not going to do it in Canada. Because again, the fight today is between human civilization and non-human satanical trans evolutionary civilization, which has nothing to do with humanity or divine spike of reason. It's about it's those who believe in God, okay, and those who don't, who believe in the Satan. And we have no choice but to win this, and we will win this because the good Jay always prevails. It's gonna cost us a lot because we've been too complacent and too dumb to realize that this is real. Because when I wrote my first book on the Bilderberg Group back in 2005, it came out in Spain.
Great book.
Okay, and it came out in the United States in 2007. People saying microchips. Okay, another conspiracy theory. Okay, that Ku Klux Klan, Bigfoot, flat Earth theory. Right, and here we are. Okay, with pandemic, with with vaccines, with Bill Gates and everything else. Do you know what I mean? And again, for those who are wondering, who the hell is this guy, yelling at the computer screen? My name is Daniel Estulin. I'm a doctor of political science in the field of conceptual intelligence. 24 years in the Russian military counterintelligence. Something I understand how things work. And again, those who've been following me for a while, I don't make too many mistakes as far as predictions are concerned.
No, you don't. Your prediction rate is really, really good. And I've been following you for a long time. And So really an honor to have you on my show.
Jay, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Let's do this again.
Let's do it
Okay,
again.
let's do this again in a few weeks, see how things go. But again, we'll see what happens in the States. I hope Trump wins. But the thing is that if the other side thinks by winning, they change the dynamic, they don't. It's again, think metaphorically speaking. The world is a Titanic. It has already hit the iceberg. A third of the Titanic is underwater. Those who think they can make refloat this thing, you can't. In about an hour, you're going to be fish, food for fish. You can be in the bottom of the ocean and you're going to be dead. There are those who will save themselves and those who will die. Majority think this is not real. Okay, that the COVID is a pandemic, that the government knows what's best for us, which is why such an alarmingly large percentage of Canadians think that a vaccine is a great thing. They're all waiting for a vaccine. Okay.
Yep.
So,
right. Thank you so much, Danny. You're great. And everybody, hope you enjoyed the program. It had so much packed into it that I just
did.
Let him talk and not get involved, because you got to hear this stuff. Most important info ever. So
I think it was like 56 minutes, me, and like 2.5 minutes, you.
I didn't want to interrupt you because I know you're right. And I want everybody to hear it. And you say it so much better than I can. So this has been Reality Check. I'm Jay Weidner. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and all that stuff. And thank you.
Take care.
Take care.